Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sloppy Lab. I'm JT Russell, and my usual co host is unfortunately swimming in a pile of woe decks in his bathtub like Scrooge McDuck, but that's okay. My guest tonight is second to none, and of course, I am talking about SecondAct, aka John. Hello, John. Welcome to Bottom of the Beaker. Welcome back to Bottom of the Beaker, I should say.
Hey, Justin, I gotta say, I'm pretty shocked that you allowed me to come back. What was this, the third time now?
Third time,
But
yeah.
I'm happy to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John, also called Second Act. I am a writer at Time Shapers, although I've been sadly negligent in that as of recent. I've got to get some articles out. And I am also a podcaster myself. I work with Dennis, also called Arlie, um, on the Weekend Key Warriors podcast. It's a strategy focused podcast that we do. And if you like Bottom of the Beaker here, I encourage you to come check us out as well.
Yeah, definitely. I enjoyed the episodes so far. I'm loving it, and of course uh, now I've got all the tips and tricks. So when I come around to play IRL, when I do so frequently, I'll be well equipped to do battle.
For those of you who don't know, um, while we're podcasting over the internet here, in real life, we live what, 5 miles from each other?
Maybe 5 miles, and I think this now means that we've done this together more often than we've played IRL together.
This is probably true.
This is probably true. This is probably true. Um, yeah. But hopefully, well, we actually were just talking before this about getting some WoW release events up and running that you're organizing at our local game store. So I'm looking forward to that. I've been resisting my GameFound pledges have come in, but so far I've only opened the kind of savior decks and one Unchained deck, and otherwise holding strong. It's kind of funny
What,
because
you haven't opened your name decks yet?
well, my tale is a story of pleasure, spite, and pain. I think that I may have fumbled. I may have fumbled uh, the personalization form for one of those pledges.
Oh,
Yeah. So we'll see. I've reached out to the fine folks at GG, and I am sure that they're super busy doing lots of things that are more important than sorting out my fat fingeredness. But you know, uh, we'll see where that goes. I have high hopes, but regardless, I'm just super pumped to have decks in hand and seeing some of these flowing. And I can tell you too that the I guess this is maybe a little bit of a spoiler, not really a spoiler, but just some info. The personalized decks don't come in outer foil, so you'll see those without having to open them what they are. So that's pretty cool. But I have one really cool name from the batch that did not get fumbled, and my brother and I both got Russell Brothers decks. So this one is Vigorously Mighty Russell Brothers J. Vigorously Mighty was.
so I love the name, except for what's the J?
I'm the J Russell brother, and he's the S Russell brother.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like Panpaka Yaga and Panpaka Anga.
Exactly. I'm the Power Fox, and he's the Skirmish Fox.
Would
Yeah.
he agree with that?
I think he'd probably say he's the Power Fox. Yeah. Almost. It's probably more fitting all around, to be honest. Yeah. Um, but yeah. Anyway, so those are coming. You can see maybe my Gruen right behind me, very very proudly adorned up on top of some boxes there. So super pumped, and welcome to the folks coming on the stream. Comments. Welcome aboard. We got Dataforge, Murph, Fudgenator. Welcome, folks, and yeah, exciting topic in store for us tonight. We are talking about Oubliette, the Oubliette variant for Keyforge, and I guess also Ouroboros. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna say it wrong like 10 million times. How do you say it? Ouroboros?
Or Roberus, I thought.
Ouroboros. So there is a book by the same name, and obviously it's a figure prominent in lore. The the serpent or the worm, the snake that eats its own tail, that eats itself, right? And I listened to this audiobook. I listened to this book as an audiobook, and you'd think I'd be able to pronounce the name Ouroboros. Ouroboros coming from the chat. Okay. And so yeah, both awesome variants. I guess maybe I'll briefly explain Oubliette, and maybe you can also fill us in on the Ouroboros.
Sure.
But yeah, so how it works is in Oubliette, you bring 2 decks, and you also choose a house to ban. So you're kind of putting a house into the oubliette, into the prison, as it were. And your opponent does the same. And so at the end of the day, you have 1, maybe 2 decks, houses that are banned. And you look at the decks you brought, the decks your opponent brought, and any deck that features one of the banned houses cannot be played. But from among those that are not banned, you choose 1. Your opponent chooses 1. And you do battle, best of 1. With your champion from the remaining decks, and whoever emerges victorious is the victor. And of course, you get to see what decks your opponent has post-ban, and they get to see what decks you have available post-ban, and you make a simultaneous selection of what to play. So there's some really interesting kind of mind games to be played, and things to consider when putting together your lineup that I'm sure we'll get into, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the format. And I should mention, of course, that this is a variant that was created by none other than by Aurora, who runs timeshapers.com and keeps the ship going over at the Sanctimonious Timeshapers Discord. So yeah. And I should say too, for the folks who haven't watched or listened to the other episodes that you've been on for, that you do also write for Timeshapers. So we got a little bit of a inside scoop there too. So yeah.
I don't know. Like I said earlier, I don't know if it's an inside scoop unless I actually start writing something. But while we're giving credit where credit is due, before I talk about the Ouroboros format, I want to give credit to Karen, who was the one who designed that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if it was named the way that it was because of the fact that it kind of sounds similar to Oubliette.
Mm-hmm.
At least a lot of the spelling is kind of similar, starts with that OU, so it kind of connects the two together. I don't know if that's what Karen was going for, if it was for something else, but at any rate, it's a very similar format to Oubliette in that it involves wanting to bring decks with different houses in them, because in Oubliette, you bring 2 decks with different houses, and then you ban 1 house that's not in your decks. However, in Ouroboros, what happens is that the tournament organizer puts all of the various decks into a spreadsheet, and then the spreadsheet spits out for every round a house that is banned for that round using a randomization algorithm. And the more houses, the more times a particular house is represented, the more likely it is that that house is going to be banned.
Mm-hmm.
So if, for example, Logos is the most prominent house, then it's more likely that Logos will get banned.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting in that it's different from Oubliette because you don't have quite as much control over what's going to happen each time. And so it's kind of fun at the beginning of each round getting to see, oh, what's the ban going to be for this round? And so it introduces a little bit more chaos into the format, I would say, compared to what Oubliette is.
Yeah, really interesting how they are, so similar, but also kind of fundamentally different too. And I get this mental image of, the format that eats itself, the serpent that eats itself, because the more prevalent a given house is represented, it's that's a juicy looking morsel for the old randomizing band machine to gobble up. So each round, the serpent kind of takes one more chomp out of the deck pool.
Well, and like I said, it can lead to just total chaos, because walking into the first round of the first Ouroboros tournament, we were all expecting the ban was going to fall on something like Logos or Dis or something like that. And we were talking before the show. I think it was your teammate, not tonight, who brought two decks that both had Brobnar in them, figuring that there was very little chance that Brobnar was going to be banned. I think the percent chance was something like 3%.
Mm-hmm.
And what did the ban fall on the first round? Was Brobnar, which led to an auto loss.
Yep. I should have looked up because I bet we could dig up those bands, because I feel like it was even more than that. It was like 2 rounds in a row. It was just like Brobnar. She was like, oh my gosh. But so funny. We joke too, because Aurora is right now running an Oubliette league through the Time Shapers League channel on Sanctimonious that we're both role playing in, and I'm sure we'll talk about our decks there and thoughts too. But we were joking as signups were going that this was going to be the like everybody bans Brobnar, just to spite not tonight. Yeah.
One of the things I think is interesting about the difference between Oubliette and Ouroboros is that typically in Oubliette, you're going to want to ban one of the stronger houses, right? Most people will ban Logos or Dis or Saurians or something like that that their decks don't want to deal with for some reason. But because of the fact that in Ouroboros you don't have control of what you're banning, there's less incentive to not bring one of those particularly strong houses. So as a result of that, you will generally see Logos and Dis and Saurians, and you won't see anybody not bring a deck specifically that doesn't have one of those, whereas in Oubliette, you sort of have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like in Oubliette, you have to bring 7 houses, where in Ouroboros, you only bring 6, because you kind of have to account for that banned house.
Yeah, there is, I guess, an extra ban at play in any given round of Oubliette than Ouroboros, right? Because you have just one ban from the system as opposed from one from each player, and the incentives created are a little bit different, right? I guess there's sort of a value proposition that's teased in front of you by both of these formats, right? If you can find good decks that are not typically going to be banned either by the player or by the spreadsheet or by the randomization algorithm, then you may end up in a situation where you have a choice, and I guess if you are having less common houses represented in your decks in Ouroboros, you're more likely to have that happen. Possibly same for Oubliette, but yeah, it's kind of this question of like, well, am I better off with my best decks and just accepting that one's likely to get banned, or can I maybe shoot a little bit lower and then try and make up some value by having a choice more often in terms of which deck I'm going to play, because none of my decks got banned. So maybe that's a little bit interesting how the two different formats kind of tee you up to maybe take advantage of that bonus or that benefit. But I think you're right. I think in Ouroboros there's maybe a little bit less incentive to play around the better houses are probably getting banned, because there's only one ban at play and it's symmetric, as opposed to you having to dance around things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately lineup building is a little bit harder for Oubliette because of that extra ban floating around. So like I kind of said before, it almost leads to having to account for 7 houses instead of having to account for just 6 houses. So it's going to stretch your collection a little bit thinner. It's kind of an interesting question, actually, talking about collections, because a lot of formats that have been created are formats that are designed to make it easier for people to compete, even if they don't have gigantic collections, or even if they don't have elite decks or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worth noting that Oubliette isn't that,
mm-hmm.
Nor is Ouroboros. But Oubliette is designed to encourage variety of decks that are played, because of the fact that you're going to have to play more different houses. But it's still going to give a gigantic advantage to people who have large collections and people who have really strong decks, because they're just going to have more strength to pull from.
Mm-hmm. So I agree with you on that. I think the goal of probably both of these, I can speak to Oubliette only because I've heard or seen Aurora say so. Less certain about Ouroboros, but yeah, the goal is diversity. Let's see some different decks get played, and then yeah, we can get into whether or not that was achieved. Um, but I'm curious, while we're on the topic, do you think that the playing field is more level in Oubliette or Ouroboros versus than it is in just kind of straight Archon, single deck Archon? Like, do you think there's some extra levers that give you uh, a mechanism to level the playing field, or do you think that we're kind of net same, or even more of an advantage to the deeper collections?
I feel like it almost works like SASCAP
Okay.
because SASCAP is one of those things where theoretically it levels out the collections, but in reality, the SASCAPs are always thrown at the same numbers. So it really gives an advantage to the people who have those decks that slide right under those numbers, right? Like let's say a 65 SASCAP. I think that's what the ABR playoffs have. So that's a good example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so a 65 SASCAP is a SASCAP that gets thrown around a lot. So people build up collections that have really good decks that slide under that. And in a similar vein, I think Oubliette really helps people who have collections that have decks that fall outside the normal Logos Dis X sort of decks.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily know that it is stronger or weaker in terms of that than what Archon is, but it does reward the people who have those decks that are a little bit different. So it's still harder to compete if you don't have what you need, but it's a different thing you need.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to dig into this, and we might as well go with it. So I pulled together some of the past Oubliette event data that I could find. So we've got some past Time Shapers leagues, all the ABR events. Unfortunately, not this most recent ABR, because I guess we had a little issue with the spreadsheet and I haven't pulled it together yet. But I'll see if I can grab it and put it together in either the show notes or as a post over on the old Sloppy Lab Work post section. But the most prevalent banned houses, right? So you've got Dis coming in at number one, with nearly 30% of the bans that were recorded going to Dis. Logos coming in at 20%, then Saurian and Untamed and Mars. So Logos and Dis combined represent about half the bans that folks gave out, which is, yeah, not surprising, but I think it raises some interesting questions, right? Like,
I mean, you say it's not surprising. To me, that's surprising. Um, and what's surprising to me is not the fact that they're just over half the bands, it's the fact that they're only half the bands.
Okay.
I would have expected Logos and Dis to account for 70% of the bands, probably.
So we got
Um,
a note in the chat, which I think is maybe what leads to some of this. I think that especially if you're coming in with a collection that's not quite as deep, right? You're going to have a hard time banning Logos or Dis and still putting up a lineup that's strong with two houses that are non-overlapping, right?
mhm.
Because even if you go in and you say, forget about the bands, I just want to have no house overlap between my decks, that's already going to strain a lot of collections. And if you then say, okay, but now also don't play Logos or Dis, that's a tough hurdle. That can be a tough hurdle. Yeah. So I think if there's one thing that's keeping those numbers from being higher, it's just that a lot of folks need those to feel like they're putting together a competitive lineup. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that the most common bands don't surprise me insofar as I guess I'm a little bit surprised that Logos wouldn't be the number one band because I think Logos is the number one driver of strong decks.
Mm-hmm.
It does surprise me a little bit that Dis is the number one band, but I guess with Infernus in there, I mean, there's a lot of decks that just do not want to face Dis kind of control. So that's going to be a major factor there. A lot of decks have a hard time dealing with board presence, so I think that's where the Saurians come in, because if you can't deal with board presence, then Saurians are going to be a significant problem for you. I
Mm-hmm.
can see where Untamed would come from just because there's so much rush available in Coda that, or in DT for that matter, that's pretty much driven by Untamed. And then Mars bans, I guess, pretty much you're just looking at trying to ban Jenka and maybe like the Battlefleet key abduction kind of stuff. But I think for the most part, you're just looking at those sorts of combo-y things.
Yeah. This would be a good question for you, I guess, because this was your ban, if I remember right correctly from the Time Shapers League. But I'm assuming that most of the Mars bans are like, yeah, I threw some really good decks out, and now I just kind of don't want to get rolled by Jenka.
Yeah, so my reason for the ban in the Time Shapers League was I picked the two decks I wanted to play, and I said, okay, now that I've got my two decks picked out and they don't have any house overlap, what is my remainder of what I could potentially face that I actually should be worried about? And I looked at the houses that were left, and I said, well, the only thing that's really dangerous that's not in one of my decks is Mars because of Jenka. So that's what I'm going to ban. And I figure that in a format where you are encouraged to play unusual houses, Mars is going to be very attractive because of Jenka.
Hmm.
So you will hit something with a Mars ban, I think, more often than you would think you would.
Yeah. Well, you hit my Jenka in that league, so it's working. We'll see if
Yeah, my first round matchup, playing against Jeffrey PP, I I hit one of his decks and he hit one of my decks, so we were down to okay, well, no choices to be made here. We know what we're playing.
Yep. Yep. I am squaring up against Karen in the first round, and we both banned Logos. So neither of us obviously are playing Logos because that would be a poor choice if it was our ban. But yeah, now we both have a choice of what to play. I think I'm not misrepresenting that. Nope. Yep. Karen also has a Logos ban. So we'll see. I have Funky Jenka that I could play, Martian Generosity, Key Abduction, Hypnotic Command, or another deck that's very rushy and very sneaky that I could play too. Yeah.
the The downside to my strategy of doing a Mars ban
Hmm.
is that if your ban misses, which when you have a when you're banning Logos or Dis or something like that, it's not likely to miss unless you're overlapping.
Yep.
But if you're banning Mars, there's a possibility that it misses. So if it misses and your opponent's ban hits, then they've knocked out one of your decks and they know exactly what you're playing. So they can then pick between the two decks that they have to figure out which one matches up better against whatever you're bringing.
Hmm.
So if you're going to do a ban that's a little bit more obscure like that, it's not one of the big bans, then you better be confident that the decks you have can handle pretty much whatever comes at them.
So I'm just chuckling myself at some of the comments in the chat. Floxamal saying, "Ooh, talk about this league. I'm about to totally whiff." We'll see. There's some spicy decks registered too. But yeah, getting all the pro tips right here and right now. So it should be fun. But so this actually teases me up really well, John, because we see historically Dis and Logos get banned. Shadows surprisingly has not been banned a lot. You'd think it would be. It's kind of like a house that comes to your mind as one to be kind of scared of, but hasn't been banned a lot. But now you are bringing a deck to the Time Shapers League that's got Dis, Logos, and Shadows in it. Some big houses in there, and so I'm curious if you. Well, one, I'm curious if you were thinking this deck is going to get played often, or we're kind of hoping to catch folks who wanted to roll with the powerhouses and have something to throw at them too. I guess I can start with that. I have another question to follow up, but let's start with that. Were you kind of expecting to play this deck often, or were you kind of thinking that you were very comfortable in the other one and, hey, it'll be nice if this happens?
No, I'm definitely not expecting to be able to play Mira very often. That the deck's in there largely to eat bans.
Mm-hmm.
If it does get through, great. I'm certainly happy to play it. but I think most of the time it's just going to be eating bans. And like I kind of said before, in that situation, you better be confident in your other deck
Okay.
because you know you're going to end up on your other deck quite a bit. So you better be sure that it can handle anything that your opponent throws at it, especially if they're going to get a choice of which one they throw at it.
All right. So you heard it here, folks. The much improved Elder of Atlapio, John's other deck.
That's a new acquisition, actually.
Okay, from Astron, I think, right?
That's right.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to seeing how it does in the league when you
That was part of my
play it.
That was part of my thinking, was that with a new acquisition and trying to figure out what decks I'm going to want to play at Vault Tours and Gen Con and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good opportunity to give it a test run,
Totally.
especially since, like I said, Mirror will pretty much get banned every time. So
You'll get to exercise it, and I mean, I guess that's a testament to the goals of the format being kind of achieved. I mean, I will admit that Oubliette has gotten me to look at my collection in different ways, and has gotten me to look at potential buys in the secondary market in different ways too. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's anecdotal, but from the two co-hosts here, at least, right? Like we can say that we're reaching for different decks and trying stuff out, and I'm just generally like love anything that's getting me to like dig deeper into the collection and look at decks in new light. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I guess what I was going to ask you before, so on the topic of these three houses, or these two houses in particular, being most ban worthy or most ban drawing, did you feel like you were, I don't know, were you worried about leaving value on the table? Like, I think there's an argument to be made that, hey, Dis and Logos, one of those two are likely to be banned, right? And
right.
if you believe that they're the two best houses that you can bring to an Archon game, is it leaving value on the table to allow one to get banned along with the other? You know what I mean?
And I certainly thought about disconnecting them.
Mm-hmm.
Partially because I thought about disconnecting them and banning one of them.
Yep.
But I looked through my collection, and when I disconnected them, and I had to, of course, take out all of the houses that were in the other one too.
Yep.
And by the way, just as a general note here, for anybody who hasn't played Oubliette before and is trying to find Oubliette decks, the Decks of Keyforge search function is fantastic for this.
Oh yeah.
What you want to do is just X out whatever houses are in one of the decks you're playing, and then X out whatever you're banned, and see what's left in your collection, and keep playing around with it like that until you figure out which two best decks you can get without hampering yourself too much with a ban. So Decks of Keyforge, absolutely fantastic for that. But getting back to your question, mostly I was just not happy with what my choices were when I disconnected Logos and Dis there. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to leave them together. I'll do the Mars ban, and I will just take the other deck and hope that it can hold up. Now, what's interesting about this is very different from the philosophy that I've brought to the ABR leagues, where in the ABR leagues, you generally don't have access to your entire collection by the time Oubliette comes up, because you've had to burn everything for Archon and Triad, and you can't use decks twice. So you have to be a lot more strategic there than you do when you have access to your entire collection.
Mm-hmm. And we kind of doubly got hit with that, right? Like we just wrapped up the regular season for the ABR League, ABR 9. I don't want to misquote it, but I think it's 9. Yes.
I think so.
And Oubliette was the 7th round that we played, right? So you can't repeat decks throughout the league. So if you played a deck in Triad or Archon or any of the other weeks ahead of that, it's not eligible for this final Oubliette round. And we initially had on the schedule Woe Archon for the final week as a nod of optimism toward having the decks in hand and everything ready on TCO and what have you. And so late in the season, I think it was round 5 or something, we kind of said, no, okay, it's not going to happen. We're going to swap out Woe Archon for Oubliette. And at this point, right, no one's really, maybe some folks have, but no one's really saving decks for Oubliette for this last round. So now it's like, okay, we're changing gears. We're going to bring a good decks format. And hopefully you all have some heat left that doesn't overlap in houses and sets things up, right? So it was interesting there too. Doubly interesting.
Yeah, and I will take the blame for the fact that Oubliette ended up in ABR this season. I was the one who suggested it in the first place, and I do actually enjoy the format. So I'll take the blame, but I don't mind the fact that we had it. Um, I will say that we realized on my team, probably back around the sealed week in the middle of the season, that the Woe Archon was just not looking realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, we added another tab to our team spreadsheet to start putting Oubliette decks in there, just for exactly the reason that you were saying, that what we were worried was going to happen was that we were going to be left without all our decks after Triad Week, and so we were going to end up in a bad spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a format that encourages diversity; it almost demands diversity, and you still want to have decks that can punch hard. So yeah, we did something similar. It was before it was officially switched over. We started saying, okay, let's maybe earmark some things for Oubliette. I know I had a couple that were potentials for Triad that were kind of left in the off chance that maybe it'll be needed for Oubliette. So yeah, but interesting. I will say though, I didn't play my traditional or a lineup that I've traditionally brought to Oubliette events in round 7, though I think the lineup that I did bring may have actually been stronger for it. I had to scratch my head a little bit, but I think I ended up with something that was really good. And I'm kind of excited to talk about some of the lineup crafting strategies too. But yeah,
Let's get into it.
Yeah, cool. So I think there are kind of maybe three kind of general strategies that you can talk about when considering how to put together a lineup for Oubliette. The first one, the one that kind of jumps out at you, right, is sort of what I'll call the greedy strategy, right? Like I'm going to grab my best deck and then I'm going to do that filtering in DOK and then find the best deck that doesn't hit any of that deck's houses. And now, okay, I've got my 2 decks picked. I'm going to look at the houses that are left over and make the highest value ban out of those, right? So maybe that's Mars so that I can kind of take Jenga off the table. Maybe I didn't use Saurians for whatever reason, and Saurians can really roll hard, so I'm gonna ban those. But for whatever reason, I'm kind of choosing my best decks first, and then picking a ban from whatever's left over that I think is going to give me the best value. And I think that's kind of how a lot of people approach the format initially, and I think actually, interestingly enough, if you played during the Worlds Collide era, like Worlds Collide almost makes this easy mode, right? Because you kind of pick your best Saurian Star Alliance X deck, and then you find your best Coda AOA deck that doesn't include X, and you're good to go, right? So I actually have a bunch of like good Saurian Star Alliance Brobnar decks, and I could play pretty much most of my good Coda decks with that without worrying about any overlap. And then I have a valid Oubliette lineup that's not going to like trip over itself. Whether or not it's the best lineup possible is another question. But that's kind of how I see the greedy strategy, crafting strategy. So yeah, make sense?
I do want to point out there that what you were talking about Worlds Collide really means that, and this is going to be a little bit of a hot take here, but really means that we may be at the end of the Oubliette format at the moment anyway, because once Winds of Exchange comes in, it's pretty easy to craft an Oubliette lineup at that point.
So
because
go ahead. Sorry.
Difference in houses, the difference in house strength. For most of the game's history, the strongest houses have been Logos and Dis, and then maybe Shadows, maybe Untamed, depending. Saurians, there's been a few other ones, but for the most part, it's been a consistent strongest houses. But Woe really turns that on its head, right? Because now your strongest houses are going to be Brobnar, Equidon, Unfathomable, houses that have not traditionally been strong houses. So you can very easily bring a Winds of Exchange deck along with a traditional deck from Coda or or whatever, and craft the lineup pretty easily that way. So I wonder if the format at that point becomes, I don't know, want to say unplayable, but becomes not nearly as interesting.
Hmm. I think that's true if you are always playing like evergreen Oubliette, right? Like, okay, bring decks from Coda to WoW, and then make your ban. We got a kind of a cool question in the chat about our thoughts on Ghost Galaxy entertaining Oubliette, what are potentially as an official format. Like, I think that would be awesome. We can kind of get around to what that might mean. But I think we're almost certainly approaching the point where it makes a lot of sense to talk about Oubliette, but also with set restrictions or with some sort of a window on the sets, like three most recent sets, or just WoW Oubliette. Like, Oubliette within a single set is a very different beast than Oubliette over 3 or 4 sets. Totally, yeah.
And I think that may very well just become necessary at that point, because I don't think that interset Oubliette is an interesting format at that point, because it becomes too easy to craft a lineup.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's just a lot less interesting if there's no tension, if there's less tension on one of your houses being banned, right? As you keep adding more houses, then there's just more potential to kind of whiff on a ban. And I don't know if that becomes a very sparse, if the house space becomes very sparse with decks, I guess is the way to say it. Then it becomes less interesting. So yeah, if you want to constrict the space to a set or two, it's probably more appropriate for Oubliette if it were to become an official format. Though, yeah, there are some feels around auto losses and stuff. So maybe there would be a hard restriction around not overlapping your houses or something for it if it were official.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it has to be. It can be very unclear um, sometimes to a newer player as to how the banning works and everything. So I do think something that just strictly says you are not allowed to overlap houses
Mm-hmm.
makes more sense than um, that potential feel bad moment of, you just got hit with a ban that eliminated both your decks, or you accidentally banned your own deck or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the, like, hey, you banned your own deck. Are you sure? Um, would be a good restriction to enforce. I think that the risk reward of bringing overlaps is actually like really interesting. And if the Time Shapers League is set up as a double elimination bracket, if it were, say, a round robin, I'd be tempted to overlap houses. I wouldn't do it for double elimination because, like, in a bracket, in kind of a cup scenario, like, an auto loss is devastating. But in a large round robin, I might be willing to take one auto loss for the potential upside of more choices from 2 different decks. Yeah, potentially. But anyway, I guess just to kind of capstone this thought, maybe we can come back to it. I think between Oubliette and Best of One Triad, those two are really, really interesting options for, bring your own decks, no reversal, no chains, best of one um, formats or variants that could be potentially considered. But I mean, yeah.
I do love some Best of One Triad, um, but if Ghost Galaxy were to decide to look at Best of One Triad as an official format, I want it to be the actual Best of One Triad
Oh
format,
yeah, totally.
not the one that was proposed back at the beginning of the official formats.
Yeah, I think they, and to their credit, recognize that it was maybe a misfire and were adjusted. So I hope they reevaluate, but with kind of what we would call traditional best of one triad, where you bring 3 decks, get one banned, and then choose one of the remaining 2 after reviewing your opponent's lineup to play. I think that's
So
awesome format. Yeah.
it's a little bit off topic, but yeah, there's no question that formats that leave one deck on the bench tend to be the most skill intensive formats
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because, and Nordic Hexad obviously being another great example of a format like that, because it just puts so much more thought into it when you can have that kind of what I call a tech deck in there.
Totally.
But
Totally.
let's get back on topic. So, the
Yeah, back to the
second lineup crafting strategy, Justin, what is it?
oh yeah, yeah. So I'm calling this one the like top-down band strategy, and you don't have to actually pick your band first, but maybe for the sake of argument, we'll say that you do. But for one reason or other, you're kind of crafting a lineup around a ban. And the best example of this is you're going to say, hey, I'm going to ban Dis because I don't want to see Infernus. And in a world without Infernus, let me consider what are the best decks I can bring, right? So, uh, you know, easy example is, I'm, high pip counts. I'm going to ban Dis, and then I'm just going to bring lots of pips in both of my other decks, and hope that by dodging Infernus, then I've got my Dust Pixies deck, I've got my Virtuous Works decks, and I'm going to jam those, and without Infernus, hope that's enough. So I think that's kind of like the next level up from greedy in terms of thinking about your strategies. And I saw a lot of these on the ABR um, lineups too.
That was my traditional strategy for Oubliette for a long time, was to pick a band and then work around that band. And usually my band would always be Logos because, as I said before, the strongest decks tend to be Logos decks. So it really brings the power level down when you take Logos out of the equation for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, I know you have some ridiculous non-Logos decks, but they're fewer and farther between.
Yep. Well, I'm curious about this too because I think Dis has very obvious, like, okay, there's no Dis, I know what I can build around, right? Infernus is just like a presence that, when taken out, gives you some kind of avenues to work with, right? Um, with Logos, is your thought really just bringing down the power level, or are you thinking like, in a world where decks are less efficient, I have some other decks that can thrive, or is it some kind of combination? I don't know.
I think it's exactly the second thing.
Mm.
When you take Logos out and you take that efficiency out, first of all, you like I said before, you do bring down the power level at that point overall by taking out that efficiency. But you also, for the most part, tend to force people into needing alternate forms of efficiency in order to get their decks moving. And if you have decks that can provide those alternate forms of efficiency, then that can work out really well for you.
Mm.
That was my strategy for this ABR season, where I brought a deck that had, and it was shocking for me, but it was a DT deck. um, and it had a Hingska combo in it. Actually, it's a double Hingska. It has the Hings and Gross twice, which is kind of cool because they can grab all the Hings and Grosses at once.
Gross.
Um, exactly. And it ended up being unfortunate that it just didn't draw well. But had it actually drawn decently, I would have been able to get a significant amount of efficiency going, and I think that would have overcome not having Logos around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, the decks that can thrive in a less efficient world, or bring efficiency otherwise, is a good one there too. I struggled. I will admit I struggled a little bit with the Logos band kind of top down approach, because I did come at it more of like, yeah, there's efficiency, but there wasn't like a card that was missing that was so prevalent that I could exploit. Like, okay, you could say there's no Eddie, um, but there are other key cost increasers that are common too. Um, I mean, yeah, I definitely have some efficient non-Logos decks. Brickblade is a favorite on the show, that Arlie dismantled at a sad Brickblade day. No fault of the pilot, just a sad deck day. but but yeah, that's an interesting one. And I'll be curious to take a look at some of the lineups too. Um, yeah,
Oh,
no auto encoder. Mm-hmm.
and in the end, it doesn't matter how good a deck is. Any deck can lose to an unfortunate draw. It just, is going to happen sometimes.
Yep. Yep.
even if it is what is that, the most efficient non-logos deck in the world? Am I right about that?
The most efficient non-logos deck in the world, as rated by DOK. Indeed, it is. Unless there's been one printed more efficient between last week and this one. Yeah, it was a fun deck. Double-edged sword, those punctuate equilibriums. But man, when they line up, that deck can really fly. It is a fun blend to play. Yeah. Cool. So the last strategy is really sort of building on the second one, and I don't have a classy name for it. So folks in the chat or you, John, if you have an idea, I'm all ears. But this one is I'll describe it as you bring decks that not only thrive in a world where your banned house is banned, but also try to cover holes left or that might be attempted to be exploited by bans from your other house or other deck in your lineup. And that was a lot of words that probably sounded like soup. So I'm going to give you an example.
That's good, because even I was having a hard time following.
Yeah. I'm still shopping the description there. But the lineup that I played, definitely soup. Well, maybe it was tasty soup. I don't know. Thanks, chat. Some gazpacho, some nice chilled soup. I don't know. But I brought Combogrieve, a different Combogrieve, Combogrieve Cell Warden. And Combogrieve Cell Warden features Dis, Shadows, Starlines. And I also brought Evil Twin of Duchess Ventura, Logos, Unfathomable, Untamed, with Saurians being banned. So no dinos. Neither of these decks, really want to see runaway boards. But you can see they both have either Dis or Logos. And prime example of what I'm trying to say is my non-Dis deck tried to have answers to things that you would bring if you were banning Dis. Does that make sense? So if you were to ban, Dis, then you probably are bringing something very rushy, right? If you ban Dis or even Shadows, something very rushy generates Amber very quickly. So I made sure to bring a deck that was capable of dealing with lots and lots of Amber. And similar for some of the other houses, right? Like I tried to think like, well, if you ban Untamed or if you ban Logos, what are you going to be doing? And am I making sure to bring counter tech in my opposite deck for those types of strategies?
I think that you could be right. I also think it's possible that if somebody, for example, bans Dis, I think it's possible that they ban Dis simply because they don't like playing against control. And I think that personal preference does play a lot into people's oubliette choices as well. So, some people don't like playing against Rush, so they might ban Untamed. Some people don't like playing against control, so they might ban Dis.
Mm-hmm.
I do wonder, looking at some of the bans that were on your data, I saw Unfathomable come up as a ban a few times, and you're just talking about Unfathomable, so it made me think about this. And I'm wondering what the goal was for people who were banning Unfathomable at this point. Now, if you throw Woe into the mix, I totally understand why you're banning Unfathomable, and I get that. But DT Unfathomable, I mean, I guess it has a lot of bounce effects, so if you don't want to deal with those kind of bounce effects, but in that case, like if you're worried about that kind of control, you're probably still banning Dis instead, because Dis is still more dangerous in terms of its control until you get into Woe. So I am kind of curious as to what the thinking was behind Unfathomable bans. I figured maybe people who were bringing Saurians, and so they were worried about getting their creatures bounced all the time, which DT Unfathomable is very good at doing. But yeah, I don't totally get that. Maybe someone in the chat has an idea. I'm not sure what the thinking was there.
Yeah, it could be like I just don't want to play against DT, and this is me thumbing my nose at DT sort of a thing. But yeah, in terms of the things that Unfathomable is doing, I'm struggling a little bit in terms of like, if I want to not see Maelstrom, then I'm probably better off banning Untamed and hitting Nature's Call and Lost in the Woods or something, right?
Yeah.
But if I also, for whatever reason, have to play Untamed, then I'm going on to the next thing. So maybe it's the quick draw, the quick draw spite ban just to hit those whirlpools. Maybe. Yeah, I don't
felt
know.
so bad for quick draw during our ABR game because he had this whole whirlpool plan, and his whirlpool came out, and I had multiple forms of R in the deck because in the jank week you had to be ready for anything,
Mm-hmm.
and the whirlpool did not last the turn.
Nope. And I want to say too, didn't you have like Drumbles and things in that deck too? So it could have been
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, there is a Drumble in there, but my general feeling is that if you're bringing a Whirlpool deck, you probably have a Whirlpool plan. My
Yeah.
Coda deck probably is not as good at dealing with Whirlpool as what your deck is going to be. If I'm bringing maybe like a Sanctum Saurian, like deck, then maybe I take the chance there. But just for the sake of the one Drumble, I don't think it's worth taking that chance.
No. And I mean, if you really have to commit to that Drumble too, it's like I'm never gonna play creatures just so that I can play Drumble, pass it to you, and then be able to pass it right back. If you also have an empty board, so it's
And
yeah.
Drumble is so easily avoidable too because of the fact that you can just go to 6 and that generally solves the problem.
Hmm. Yep. Yep. Um, yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see. Where was he? I don't know if I was anywhere. But anyway, back to the lineup crafting strategies. So to close this point out, I want to actually hit on something that Quickdraw was saying. And if he was here, he would definitely have some points to raise about Oubliette or similar formats. In his mind, like SASCAP, right? Any types of formats or variants that place artificial restrictions on the game or the decks that you can play, like Jank, right? So we're saying, 75, 65 SAS or lower, or you get to ban a house, and now all of a sudden the deck pool is constrained, and the sort of natural balance that comes from the algorithm is upset, and it makes for the potential of very, I don't know, for the RPSness of the game to be abused in ways that are not necessarily healthy, shall we say. So it opens up the door to abuse kind of these inherent imbalances that get counterbalanced with the fullness of the environment. But when you take just slices of it, it's more easy to set up these things that are, I don't know, less balanced, shall we say. I don't know if I explained that super well, but
I'm I'm also not super convinced that it's a major problem for Oubliette because I think the deck pool is still deep enough to allow for a lot of balancing and counterbalancing. Um, I do think that in formats like SASCAP, it becomes a bigger problem.
mm,
And the reason for that in SASCAP is because of the fact that ultimately SASCAP is based upon one person's opinion of what card strength is. I mean, I know there's a council that helps out and everything, but it is ultimately based on one person's opinion of what card strength is. And it is generally very good, but we do know that it has gaping holes, DT being one of those gaping holes. And so it's a lot easier to find the weaknesses in that system than to find the weaknesses in the entire card pool simply restricted by houses.
mm. So his, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here, but I think his comeback to that would be something like, well, whether or not you think Infernus is fun, it provides a very important pressure on the environment, on the metagame, to keep kind of pip heavy rush in check. And so you take it out, you're kind of opening up the door for some of these strategies that are normally kept in check to become a little bit more abusive. I don't know. I guess posing that as a question, I think Well, yeah, I'll pose it as a question before I give my take.
I mean, I guess my question there would be that if Infernus in the meta is necessary in order to keep Pip Heavy Rush in check, then what happens in sets where you don't have Infernus? Like, take, for example, much as again, I hate to do it, but take DT as an example. DT has a lot of Pip Heavy Rush. There's a lot of very Pip Heavy Rush decks in there. And Infernus is not in a DT only meta because Dis isn't in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if that's the case, then does that mean that the only thing that matters in DT is just Pip Heavy Rush decks and there's nothing else there?
Well, I mean, nobody's playing DT only Archon though, right? Like your DT Archon. Well, I guess save some events, right? I guess. Well, I guess no, that's fair because I mean, Joker ran some uh, events with
That were DT only, yeah.
that were DT only, and yeah, we didn't see kind of Pip Heavy Archon running away with things. So that's true. That's true. That's fair. That's fair. Um, yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I guess where I was going to try and circle this around to is I think Infernus is one example. Uh, you can also see folks bringing capture and exalt heavy decks and then saying, okay, no untamed, right? Like no nature's call, no lost in the woods, and does that take away one of the best answers to an otherwise abusive strategy? Um, and I think my take on that, or my response to that, is well, maybe, but maybe it also challenges you to dig a little bit deeper in your collection, um, and that's kind of tying into the third lineup crafting strategy, where, like, okay, if you have a deck with Untamed that features Nature's Call, or even if you are not playing Nature's Call in Lost to the Woods, um, but your non-Untamed deck may value even more highly things like bounce, like fear or lights out, right? Because if
Right.
you see an untamed ban and you have to play a non-untamed deck, it's very likely you're playing something that doesn't want to see those cards. And so I almost want to say, like in an Oubliette world, like Graft may be better than TMTP. I don't know, because if Shadows gets banned because of TMTP, you might be super happy to have Graft. And then similarly, like Lights Out, Fear, their stocks go up because you're going to get to play them in games where you might not get to play Lost in the Woods or Nature's Call. And in particular, are seeing decks that really don't want to see Lost in the Woods or Nature's Call.
And there's other answers to those sorts of things too, right? I mean, there's something like Cyberclone. It's a
Mm-hmm.
terrible card, but the harder they come,
Mm-hmm.
we'll deal
Yeah.
with a lot of those things. And then we were talking before about Unfathomable. Unfathomable has a whole bunch of things that bounce. There's Hysteria and Dis. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of answers there. And I guess my point is just the fact that there is no house that has an exclusive monopoly on being able to counter another house.
Mm-hmm.
There's always tools available.
Yeah. I think you could make a case for like there being a house that does the counter thing best for any particular strategy. Most
Yes.
strategies anyway. Um, and I think this third lineup crafting approach, I think what I'm trying to highlight is that, if you're looking for a very well-rounded Oubliette lineup, then it's worth considering what's going to be valuable to have in one deck when the other one gets banned. And I guess that was kind of the big takeaway, the big punchline, um, uh, for strategy number 3. But I think it also,
It's
yeah, it gives a nod toward how you can really take advantage of, or turn the idea on its head of some of these artificial restrictions, creating more one-sided matchups or more variants, and see it more as an opportunity to like create some more evenness in your lineups. I don't know, but maybe.
and it's interesting because you can do a lot of this kind of theory crafting about, oh, if I do this, then my opponent might do this, so I have to counter with this. And but at the end of the day, I've always found that the best strategy is to bring good decks
Mm-hmm.
and trust in those good decks. And most of the time that strategy will pay off. Now, obviously, having the game skill to recognize where the threats are and be able to use your pieces to neutralize them, but most good decks will be able to answer to some degree just about anything. Now, they may answer some things better than they answer other things, but they should have at least some tool that can work against anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at the end of the era where like you can afford to bring a deck to a competitive event that doesn't have artifact control, for example. I think there's too many dangerous artifacts out there for that. So you need to have a good deck, have answers to various things, and if you have that, I think ultimately that will serve you well in the end.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. I think if you can bring a lineup to bear that is strong enough to, I don't know, even just ignore the fact that you're playing a format like Oubliette and there are bans happening, then go for it. Like that's probably the best thing you could do. Um, the deck that comes to mind for me uh, is my other combo grief, the one that I do usually talk about on the show. He Who Slices the Gully. Um, it's a deck that I would probably consider bringing to Archon, or have definitely considered bringing to Archon, but probably would not consider bringing to Oubliette, only because its houses are also its kryptonite. You know, so while I would uh, be fine with wading through an open Archon field where there are going to be some number of Infernuses, I probably wouldn't say like, hey, Dis is not getting banned, and I'm very likely seeing lots of Infernuses on the day. Um, so yes and no. I think that it comes down to knowing your decks, knowing how well they're going to thrive in an open environment, but also how well they're going to thrive uh, maybe in the Oubliette world too, per se.
I will say though that based upon the data that Aurora showed in terms of which houses were most common in the Time Shapers League,
Mm-hmm.
and sorry, which cards were most common as well, Infernus wasn't on there,
No.
at least not amongst the top cards,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because it's almost always number one on those lists, except, sometimes Theros Centurion for whatever reason.
Totally. It's a sleeper there, but it's so true. Yep.
But it means that we do get a bit of variety in the meta in playing Oubliette. So it kind of achieves its goal in that way, right? You don't end up with the exact same um, lineup compositions that you see in Archon.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I mean, even setting aside that you don't have any overlap in your houses between the two decks, probably there is some I don't know, self policing happening too, where you're like, I maybe want to avoid some of these bands, so I'm not gonna bring the Infernuses or something and try and dodge a ban or two, which is pretty cool.
I didn't look specifically, but I'm actually wondering if anybody in that league brought a logo/disc deck other than the one that I brought.
Hmm. I could probably find out not at the moment, but I think Aurora has a tag for all the decks. I'll dig it up in a second here. I'll put it in the show notes. I did not. I can tell you that. We have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 bands for either Logos or Dis. So the possibilities are not too many. There's 7 potential lineups that could have it. Um, 8 potential lineups.
Looking here, it's definitely not amongst the most popular house combinations.
That is for sure. That's for sure. Hmm.
Here's the DOK tag. I bet you I can find out very easily just by doing this. There are 2.
There are 2.
There was one other deck besides mine.
Let's see
And
if
it is a deck that is in a language I do not recognize.
Ooh. Which one's that? Drop it in the old chat. I'd be curious to take a look.
Here we go. Did it show up there?
I'm not seeing it. That's right. What are we looking at for the deck composition?
It's a 70 SAS deck. It is Dis Logo Saurian. So very brave to bring that.
That's brave. Or who's
Yeah.
the owner? I might be able to find it over here.
It doesn't say on here. There's no deck verification image, and I don't have the DOK level to see.
Okay, found it.
Okay.
Interesting. Dislogosaurian. Really interesting. Got Zenzi, 2 Ludos. Sorry about that. Inspector, no Infernuses. Okay, interesting one.
Yeah. Very
Gerardo.
interesting.
Oh, spicy. I like it. Bold. A bold move. All of the
Yep.
bands. The band magnet deck.
Mm-hmm.
I dig it. Okay. Cool. We'll see how it fares. I'll be curious. Purple. I think that's the purple taste deck. I think they've hopped in on the streams here before. Korean, if I'm remembering right.
That could be. Like I said, I didn't recognize the writing.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, that's sweet. I don't know. Maybe we should put some of this theory to the test. Try out an Oubliette game of our own.
Sure.
I guess, yeah. I gotta know. I feel like we could definitely talk about this for another hour, but maybe we'll save that for the next one, the bonus content, and talk about our lineups that we end up playing on the stream. So the folks who are listening have some incentive to head on over and catch the recording too. But yeah, I don't know. Any kind of final words on Oubliette you want to drop or Ouroboros before we kind of switch gears?
I think ultimately, if you haven't tried the format, Oubliette or Ouroboros for that matter, I think it's absolutely worth trying. I think that it's a fun format to play, and it does lead to a different Keyforge experience than what you're typically going to be used to. That said, if you're expecting that it's going to be a format that's going to, solve all of the problems of Keyforge where everybody is going to be on a level playing field, that's not the format for you. There are formats that attempt to do that, but Oubliette is not one of them. Oubliette is just going to give you some good variety, a little bit of a different play experience, but it is still going to ultimately advantage deeper collections and stronger decks.
Right on. Cool. Well, I guess I'll give us a note from our sponsors for this episode. Very, very thank you much to our sponsors. So today's episode of Bottom of the Beaker is sponsored by Tangle Roots Hair Salon and Spa, with services ranging from haircuts to full body waxes. Tangle Roots will leave you feeling fresh and ready to take on any opponent. Tangle Roots, because looking good is half the battle. So thank you, Tangle Roots. Folks who are interested in hanging out with us for our live recordings of Bottom of the Beaker can do so every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern right here at twitch.tv/sloppylabwork. If you'd like to see recordings of our past episodes and other streams, head on over to youtube.com, search for @sloppylabwork there. And for the very best content, 3,457 times distilled and scraped from the bottom of the beaker. Search for that phrase, bottom of the beaker, in your podcatcher of choice, and we'll be there staring at you up from the Oubliette. Many thanks to John for hopping with me and talking some Oubliette this evening. John from the Weekend Key Warriors cast. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Justin.
And stay sloppy, folks. Cool. Stay sloppy. All right, so let's play a game.
Let's
play a game. So how should we do this? We've got a couple lineups we could pick from, unless you have a new one that you want to do.
Should we bring our maybe we should bring our lineups from week 7 of ABR?
Cool. Just because this Oubliette showdown could happen, or in Time Shapers, so maybe we'll save that. We'll save that. All right, sweet. So I have a Logos ban. No, I don't have a Logos ban. I have a Saurian ban, excuse me. Saurian ban.
Okay, and I have a Logos ban.
Okay, so that means I'm not playing the evil twin of Duchess Ventura. Okay.
So that means that I am on my DT deck.
Okay, and I'm playing Combogrieve Cell Warden, giving the other Combogrieve some love on the stream
That's
here.
not the right deck. There we go.
Adjusting the layouts a little bit.
Would you like me to send this deck over to you?
Yeah, toss it over. I'm going to throw it in the chat for the stream here.
Yeah, I couldn't see the stream chat during all of that.
Misspells.
Still can't.
Let's see. Interesting. So, did you have the Twitch stream open?
The Twitch stream open?
No. There we have it. Let's see.
Hopefully that didn't cause any problems.
No. Plus, we keep it sloppy. You know, problems are par for the course. If there were no problems, we'd be off brand.
Fair.
Yep. All right, so I'm killing the Zencaster recording. That's going to switch up my layout over on OBS. And Zencaster, if you're listening, yeah, let's keep those layouts consistent whether you're recording or not. That would be most excellent. Okay, cool. I think that'll do it. So you've got Valencel, who misspells currency, certainly mispronounces. Is that how you say it? Valencel?
I've always said Valencel, but...
Valencel. Okay, like valence electron, but the Valencel.
Yeah.
Nice. And I've got Combogrieve Cell Warden. Very cool.
I also think this deck is a tremendous missed opportunity because I think the word currency should have been misspelled in the title.
Yep. Yeah, not living up. Or maybe the word is not actually currency. You know, it's like currently or something. But it's misspelled, so it looks like the wrong word, you know?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I don't think I've played Cell Warden on stream before, so this will be fun. It's a really fun deck. All right. New game coming up. Password.
I guess it's only appropriate that I end up playing a DT deck while I'm on as a guest here.
Yeah, I hope Murph's watching because John was telling me before that he just loves DT, can't get enough of it, and wants to gush about DT the next time we chat about DT on the show.
I don't think that was the exact quote. In fact, I don't even think that's near the exact quote.
It was in that ballpark.
What is your game password here?
Sloppy. All right, let's see how this goes. So what are we working with here? We've got double assert dominance, double infighting, 2 Witch of the Dawn, Deepwater Gruen. Okay. So some recursion for this Gruen and Chelonia nonsense. Double Hings and Gross. Unity or Discord United Action. And Triska. Oof. Okay, so things can get out of hand very quickly. And you have some taunting. To protect things if need be in the shoulder ids. Okay. All right, just adjusting the layout a little more. Cool. All right, off and away. Good
Indeed.
luck. Have fun.
To you as well.
All right, going first. Dig it. Okay. Best way to win at Keyforge is always to draw turn 1 Valgerico. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, that does help a lot. Another good strategy is to not mulligan into a hand like the one I just mulliganed into.
Doing it wrong, John. Doing it wrong.
I am definitely doing it wrong.
All right. Thin the Herd could be a thing. I'll just play out this Obsidian Forge. We'll see what happens. Sea urchin, huh?
It
That is
indeed
a
sea urchin.
suspicious play. That is a suspicious play. That smells of a man with double assert dominance in hand. Interesting. Or setting up the... Do you have Grand Alliance Council? You do. Could be setting that up. Interesting. Well, we'll see. One way to find out. I'm going to go Shadows. Some decisions. I'm definitely triggering the folks in the chat right now if they're watching, half dragging on cards to play. Yeah, let's play the Soul Keeper. Sure. Okay. Setting myself to maybe do things after the infighting comes. We'll see. Double gross. Okay. Gets the Hings. Do they have the Triska? Mm-hmm. Ooh. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Okay. Nice. We'll go Shadows. Subtle Auto comes down. Hits a thing.
It did hit a thing.
Hits a thing. Awkward. I could have set this up better. I'm going to fight into Hings. Number 1. Fight into Hings number 2. Sag. Just putting a stop to the combo here.
Yeah, and you know what the combo drew? It drew 2 Shadows cards and 3 Untamed cards.
Ugh.
This deck, just for whatever reason, seems to have just the worst luck.
Yeah, a Unity or discard there would have been lights out.
Yeah, it would have been very good.
Cool. Mm-hmm. All right, we're going Star Alliance. Ooh, 2 cards I would rather not discard. Discard that. that Bona thing. No reaps there. All right, now should I? Ooh, interesting one already. How many tide raisers do you got in here? Just the one? Just the one trickle down theory? I'm gonna borrow the static collection array and see if that ends up being a really big mistake. Such a play, right? It was questionable whether it was a good play, but it was definitely the right play to do on stream. Borrowing that is such a play. It is a play, chat. It is a play. Right, Murph? We all want to play with the DT cards.
Hmm.
And probably should have taken the tide.
No. I don't love putting Val back in the center, but she's probably going back in the center no matter what I do.
Mm-hmm. Oof. Okay, that's a key. An expensive key, but a key. All right, we'll go dis. Go dis. Play this essence scale. Play this safe house.
Mm-hmm.
Dark minion. Brabble. A reap with Infernus. And I'm going to hit Stealthster and Dark Minion. And take the tide, which I probably should have done before. And pass. Okay, and done into Star Alliance. Done like a man who has, United Action or GAC. There's United Action. Okay. Mookling comes down. Amber from Chelonia.
Yeah, now I got to figure out the next play here.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yep, that can pop up, and I guess that maybe. Sure, we'll do that.
Cool. So I get back my access denied. You've got back your witch.
You get back your access denied.
Triska. Oof. Yeah, United Action is super cool. Chat enjoying United Action. Really working well here with Unity or Discord, the Witch of the Dawn, and some of the upgrades. Chelonia getting extra value. Getting a sea urchin back. Nice. Okay, this would be really sad with Hings and Gross live too.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that does nothing.
Ready's in advance. Okay, wowza. Well then. So we are going to go shadows. Interesting. Play out this Trigon. Nice mutant.
Yeah, sooner or later it would probably be advantageous to get that Jericho off the board.
Doing some work. Dark Wave to clean up a whole bunch of things. Play this lucky dice. Vandalize you. Some options for sure. I guess it depends on what we're doing. With the rest of our hand. Tough call. I think I'm actually going to send out this Miasma Bomb. Okay. Fight off the Triska. Give us both an amber. Mug one off.
I appreciate your Martian style of generosity there.
Yeah. Yep. And all right, taking the tide. Okay.
Not a lot of good options here, but we're going to go this option, I think.
Let's see, I think we've yet to see one more assert dominance. You've still got 2 infightings coming at some point.
Yes, at some point.
The chains are coming.
Oh, no. Missed the opportunist there.
Yeah. You want to roll that one back?
No, it's fine. It's always difficult. Like I was saying to somebody the other day, I'm ready for real life play because it's so difficult on TCO to see what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the upgrades. I don't know. I've said this is my favorite one. The cloaking dongle. It's like if you're sitting next to a cloaking dongle, I don't know. I'm just gonna attack the creature next to it every time and then scratch my head.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happens to me too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so probably not infighting coming, which is good. I have a turn to deal with these shoulder ids before they steal everything. Okay, assert dominance. Cool.
Yeah. None of these are really particularly good targets.
Yep. Yeah. Interesting point from the chat. Wish upgrades had some more visual clarity. I think there's some
Yeah.
interesting things they could have done with things like elusive or taunt to give like some visual treatment to the frame even for some of
Yeah.
these things. Could have been good.
I'd also like to see a flash up on screen when something like stealth mode hits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As not just in the chat, you mean, but like something more
Yeah.
visible. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. The
totally.
white box in the chat, like I still miss that all the time.
Yep. 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 Okay, we're gonna go. We're gonna go dis. We are gonna take our archives.
I have to get that in furnace back.
Yep. And ooh, make sure that I do this right. Key cost +3 at the moment. So I could go to 5, 6, 7, 8. Ooh, one short. One short? Is it? Ooh, count this again. Not quite. Okay. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to use my off-house play to hit the 3s and 6s with the Contrino Flux. Planet Furnace to hit.
Yeah. Definitely could have used that infighting at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Or my own Val, for that matter.
Oh man, snap hit yours, and I'm seeing no pips. Womp womp. Well, let's take this sea urchin and.
Yeah, this deck is actually one of the interesting things about it is it only has 5 pips in the entire deck.
Yeah, 5 pips.
And of those 5 pips, 4 of them are still in my deck.
I'm going to capture onto the Lyco Fiend. Draw a card here. Ooh, that's not a bad draw. Smash the Mookling. And then, yeah, we're going to Essence Scale to gobble up this Infernus and Reap.
Yep.
And then I'm going to use the Lucky Dice to prevent damage on the next turn.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Seems reasonable. Seems reasonable. Yeah, pretty good. It was coming. It was coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's not enough, but it needed to be done.
Yeah. I think I'm just going to jam some pips here.
That guy could have been helpful earlier.
Yep.
But no, nothing to answer it. Good game.
Okay, good game.
Good
game well played.
Just drew both infightings.
There they are.
Val is still somewhere in deck.
Yeah. Yeah, the turn 1 Val goes a long way. Goes a long way.
I mean,
Val on bottom 4.
It goes back to what I was saying earlier, you know, it's just sometimes you get the draws and sometimes you don't.
But I'll take them when they come.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, of course, it's not a fair fight either, right? DT against MM.
I know, DT best set, right? Yep.
Not
Yep.
exactly what I said.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that. I don't know. Yeah. The although we have a tradition now of being really horrible hosts and winning the game with the guest on the stream.
Hey, no, I beat you on the last one.
That's true. That's true. Were we playing hand and brain against you, or were you teamed up? I forget.
No, so the first time we played Hand and Brain, and you and Quick Draw won against Beehawk and I, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And the second time it was just you and I, and um, I don't remember which deck you played, but I know I used Mira and won the game pretty handily.
Okay, so that was probably the secondary market one then.
That was the secondary market episode. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
And then in this one, you have beaten me again, so I'll have to get you again the next time.
Best of three, baby. I'll take it. Yeah, we'll make it best of five at least. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, interesting one. So I had a definitely a good start. I'm not sure. It worked out, but I think that maybe purging the Hings Gross combo early on um, was for the best, though.
Oh, I mean, it absolutely was. And
Yeah, you have a
I
lot
mean,
of recursion.
really, I just needed better draws at the beginning. I needed to hit something off the Hings Gross combo, preferably the Grand Alliance Council.
Hmm. Or Unity or Discord would have been
Unity
really
or
strong.
Discord would have helped. Yep.
Just snowball there.
But anything to get that Val off the board, and it just sat there the whole game because I couldn't find anything to answer it.
Hmm. And I mean, you have a decent amount of board control too. I mean, you got the GAC, double infighting, the assert dominance, double insert dominance, Jackie
Yep.
Tar if
In the herd.
in the herd.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it was all buried at the bottom.
Hmm. And even Whisper, you might have had to turn the Whisper on, and that would have gotten around the Soulkeeper, right?
And wouldn't have gotten around Soulkeeper. I mean, it would have still eaten a shoulder id, but
Oh, does Whisper purge or destroy? Whisper
it
destroys.
destroys.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Okay. Yeah, fair. Interesting.
It would have gotten around the lucky dice.
Yeah. Lucky Dice definitely comes in handy more often than I'd like to give it credit for. Like, it's one of those cards where you're like, it's kind of a throwaway pip 90% of the time, but every once in a while it's like, this is exactly the card that I need in the situation, you know?
Yeah, this is a weird deck. It's probably my best DT deck, but it's also a deck that it's the only deck I think that I keep in my TCO that wins it below 50%.
Mm.
Generally, if I'm keeping a deck in my TCO, it's going to be winning at 60% minimum.
Hmm.
But
Interesting.
because it's my best DT deck, I keep it, and because it can occasionally be explosive and fun, but it's definitely not good.
Yeah, I mean, the double Hings Gross is really cool. I feel like some archiving would go a long way. Um, but you have a lot of creatures. It feels like, yeah, you need that explosive turn or to not get a lot of board control pressure from the other
Yeah,
side.
board control pressure destroys it, and that's
Hmm.
that's always been its issue, is that you get that big turn off, and then your opponent wipes the board, and then you've got nothing.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 I have a couple Hings Gross decks. One or two with Triska, and that feels like the trouble or the trick with it, right? It's kind of like the Jenka mini game where you're like trying to get to 5 and they're trying to keep you low, and then eventually
Mm-hmm.
you either lose at 3
Yep.
amber and 0 keys, or you win the game with like 3 keys all at
Right.
once. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Hmm. Cool. Well, fun game. We'll see if things go differently in the Time Shapers League if we match up, I suppose. Definitely they'll go differently in that we'll be playing different decks, or at least I will be.
There
And
will
you've
be
got a different
definitely
lineup
different
too.
decks. Yep.
Mhm. So we'll see. But we'll sign off there from the stream. Thanks to folks for hanging out with us. A lot of fun, and yeah,
Yeah, I
thanks to
wish I'd been
SecondAct.
able to see the chat.
We'll figure out what that was. I don't know. Yeah, I should probably set it up so that you can see it on the stream too. I gotta level up my streaming game. But bye, peeps. Later, Dinobot. Thanks, Murph. And Ryan, thanks for folks hanging out. We'll see you around the lab.